This is where they store their tools and explosives for a few reasons. First, if they stored them outside, they could get wet or stolen. If they stored them back where they were blasting, if those explosives caught a spark, exploded, it could kill the miners. If it exploded in here though, it just blow out the front of the mine, the townspeople could hear it and see it and dig the miners out, hopefully. This timber up here, this is called cribbing. It was put here because of this rock. This is called a schist. It's very soft. In some spots you can break off chunks with your hands. Now if you look closely, you can see a bunch of little black dots. Those are garnets, a January birthstone. Now if you guys decide to pan for gold out in the hills when you find garnets, that's a good indication that you're digging in the right area. That's because the garnets are extremely dense, just like gold. Now you can also see a bunch of little sparkles everywhere. That's mica. What they mainly use mica for nowadays is a glitter in makeup. What they used to use it for is insulation in transistors and also windows and wood stoves before there was heat-resistant glass. Now as we go farther back in the mine, the cribbing will end, and that's when the granite dolomite mix will begin. Does anybody have any questions before we head just a little farther back?
Am too tall? Ooh, look at this. It's wet.
That's when the water seeping through the rock, and the snow came with that. A few people want to stand right in here, one or two over here. Part of the mine is not original. It was drilled and blasted in the 1950s to show the different ways that they drilled and also a blasting pattern. Now this is called the pneumatic drill, and it's also known as the widowmaker. Now the reason why it was called the widowmaker is the person working this had the life expectancy of only 6 months. The reason for that is while they're drilling, a lot of dust comes flying out. The miner breathed it in, causing silicosis. It's similar to the black lung. And the miner working this made only $1.50 a day. He was one of the highest paid miners in the mines, and he had one of the shortest life expectancies. Now some of the smarter miners wrapped a couple bandanas around their mouth. This kept out some of the dust. This only added maybe a month or two to their lives. These are the drill bits that they used. These are made out of mild steel. They go on 3.5 inches and last only 90 seconds. They'd only bring in 150 of these per drill, and after these 150 were done, they'd have to go downtown to the blacksmith shop and have them resharpened, which took about 5 minutes apiece. Now this wasn't very efficient, so in the early 1860s, these were invented. Now they screw on and off, last the same amount of time. You can bring in 400 or 500 of these per drill. Now in the mid-1870s, they modified the pneumatic drill, so they were able to pump water through it to be a lot less dust and saving miners' lives. This also made the drill bit last for about 2 minutes. Now in the early 1900s, they started to use high carbon steel drill bits. Those will last for around 10 minutes. In the mid-1950s, they started to use diamond covered bits. Those will last for around 10 hours. In the late 1980s, early 1990s, they started to use tungsten carbide bits, and those can last up to 200 hours. Now before the pneumatic drill was invented, or if you didn't have enough money to own one, like Angle and Crook until farther back, you had to use hand tools. Like this. Now this is called a starter bit or an angle bit, and how you use it is called double jacking. You put it over your shoulder just like this. The other guy would swing an 18-pound sledgehammer. Now most mines weren't very well lit. They usually had a candle, maybe a lantern, so they couldn't see into this very well, so they had to make a mark. If they painted something on it, it wore off really quickly, so they cleaned up a fingernail or a thumbnail, put it over just like this, go 1, 2, 3 mark, hopefully getting their thumb or finger out in time. If not, they had 9 more fingers. After 15 minutes or so, they'd switch sides. They'd keep using the starter bit until they went in about 3 inches. Then they'd switch over to a bit just like this. Do the same exact thing, except after each hit, they just did a 1/4 inch turn. Now they had to go in 3 feet to place a charge. They had to drill 8 holes to place a blasting pattern. Now to drill the entire blasting pattern with double jacking, that took 10 weeks. With the pneumatic drill, using these drill bits, it took 5 weeks. Using these, it took 2.5 weeks. With the water going through them, it took 2. With the high carbon steel drill bits, it took 5 days. With the diamond covered bits, it took 2 days. And with the tungsten carbide bits, it only takes 8 hours.
So 10 weeks to 8 hours?
Yep. This is the blasting pattern that they used. It's called a butterfly pattern. Now the charges in the center would ignite first, creating a hole Also fracturing the rock around it. So when the charges on the outside went off 1 second later, all that rock was just going to the hole. It went to fracture the walls, creating a very stable mine. Now Engel and Krupp used black powder. It was a lot cheaper and safer versus nitroglycerin, but it wasn't as powerful. Created only about a 16-inch fracture zone. Now with nitroglycerin, it created about a 32-inch fracture zone, and they both went 3 feet back. Now if Engel and Krupp wanted to open up a copper mine, instead of going farther back that way, they would have went over this way and over that way. In fact, you can see some copper oxide just right up there. It's that dark green rock. There's also a bunch of sulfur everywhere. It's that yellow rock, iron oxide, that reddish brown rock. It's more commonly known as rust. There's some moss growing right by the light too. Now with most mines, if they hit a vein like this, they'd set up a crew to work the vein so they could pull out some copper and start to make a profit. Engel and Krupp were just looking for the gold, so they just kept on going. Now from the entrance to this wall right here, does anybody want to take a wild guess on how long it took them?
A year? A year?
2
It took them
years.
more than 2 years,
8 years?
10 years.
a little bit less, 8.
5, 4, 6, 7.
Yep, 7. It took them 7 years and they haven't found a single speck of gold yet. At this point, they're still just looking for the lucky boy vein. Could you guys imagine doing this, working 10 hours a day at a normal job, at your normal job, and then working here for 4 hours a night, just hoping that next blast you're gonna hit the mother lode?
Yeah, I really hope. It's so tight. I'm claustrophobic. Same. And that's why we wear hard helmets.
Very common thing for me.
Just a really big hole in there.
They have a set of rails going through it, a couple more carts, and this. Now this is called a mucking sheet, and it weighs 650 pounds. What they'd use it for is when they're about to blast, they put over the rails to protect the rails from falling rock. It also created a flat surface scoop up the rock, because the floors are about the same as the ceilings and the walls. Now in a normal mine with a full crew, the guy working this made 50 cents a day. He was one of the lowest paid miners in the mines, and he had one of the hardest jobs. In this mine, it was just Engel and Krupp, so they had to do everything. And this is one of 2 original pieces of the mine. That's because in World War II, the President issued an ultimatum order requiring all mines that were not working for the war effort shut down, take all their metal equipment, and melt it down to scrap iron. Now this mine was shut down well before World War II. It's just Engel and Krupp decided to leave everything in the mine. And this was left because it was covered up with a bunch of rock at the very back of the mine. Now the only exception to the ultimate order in the Black Hills was a homestake up in Lead. Since it's such a massive machine shop, so many explosive technicians, they're able to get a contract to make hand grenades, and they're also able to mine just a little bit. Now the original name of this mine was Goldfield Lode, but in 1900 it was changed to Big Thunder because every once in a while Engel and Krupp ended up getting a little drunk and bored. So to entertain themselves, they placed a bunch of explosives under this, light it off, causing it to bounce against the walls. It might even hit the ceiling. That noise could be heard throughout the Keystone Valley, hence the name Big Thunder. And if you guys look straight back, you guys will notice you cannot see the entrance. That was a safety feature. That's because while they're blasting, you have to light the fuse will run. If they're unable to make it out in time, they could just hide behind the corner, let the rocks blast right by them. Now most mines did this until about 1890 when the electric blasting cap and the blasting box was invented. So whoever was igniting the explosives could be around 200 feet away from the blast. Now Engel and Krupp decided to use normal fuses for this entire mine to save some money, and they're usually about 75 feet away from the blast. And at this post right here, it took Engel and Krupp 15 years and they haven't found a single speck of gold yet. Now they're about to give up, but before they did, they decided to do just one more blast. And with that one more blast, they finally found what they're looking for. This is the lucky boy vein. Now unfortunately for Engel and Krupp, it wasn't very lucky for them. they found a whopping 1 gram of gold. And back then, gold sold for $20 a troy ounce. So for 15 years of work, these guys found a whopping 62 cents worth of gold. Now with finding so little gold, they're pretty disappointed, so they quit for a couple of years until they heard about the Columbia vein, which is farther back, and started back up again. Now they're unable to go any farther this way. That's because only 7 feet on the other side of this wall is the end of the Lucky Boy mine. Now it's pretty hard to tell whose claim is whose, especially underground, so if any miners ever had any arguments about it, they used a very archaic surveying device called a shotgun. And at the beginning of the Lucky Boy mine, the Lucky Boy vein was about 10 feet wide. Right here, it's only about a foot. And then over on this side of the mine, it shrinks down to just 6 inches. So they didn't think it was worth it to go any farther that way or up or down with finding so little gold. Now to find an ore vein in the hills, there's 4 indicator minerals. If you guys want to scoot up so everybody can see, now almost everything I'm going to be showing is going to be over on this side or over there. So the first one is quartz. It's that white crystalline rock. Graphite, grayish black rock. It's the same stuff they use in pencils. Sulfur, that yellow rock. Then iron pyrite, just little sparkles everywhere. It's also known as fool's gold. Now how veins are formed, there'd be cracks in the rocks, and then millions of years ago these molten materials would be forced up into those cracks because of volcanic activity. Now in the Black Hills there wasn't very much volcanic activity, so the gold is usually found in a fairly fine powder. There are some exceptions in the hills. Now in other places like California, Alaska, South Africa, Russia and Australia, you can find gold in quite a bit bigger chunks. In fact, in Australia, about 2 or 3 months ago, they pulled out a little over 900 ounces of gold in 2 days out of 2 rocks about that size. And then in Russia, about 4 months ago, they pulled out a 36-pound nugget just out of an old construction site. And that's worth around $4 million right now. And this right here is a flowstone wall. Now what this flowstone wall is made out of is a mixture of calcium carbonate, sodium carbonate, some iron oxide. How this was formed is just water seeping through the rock from the rain and the snow, just dissolved those minerals. And this was deposited right here. Now this particular flowstone wall is only about 10 years old, so in a couple hundred years or so, this mine's going to end up looking more like a cave than a mine. You guys have any questions before we head just a little farther back? No? All right.
I don't need these others. Don't knock your head again. Ben. So scary.
Seems like a nice place, baby.
Now from the Lucky Boy vein to about this point right up here, took Angle and Krupp another 10 years and they haven't found any more gold. So they've been working in this mine for 25 years so far, still only 62 cents worth of gold. This is also around the 600-foot mark. Getting this far back, we would be hard for Angle and Krupp to breathe. Also after each blast, they'd have to wait up to a month for the dust to settle, versus only a couple of weeks back to Lucky Boy. Now the reason for this is we're just too far back for the air to be able to circulate from the entrance. Now with most mines, when they reach this point, they'll either drill an air shaft all the way up to the top, or they'll buy a couple air compressors, a bunch of pipes, start pumping in air. Angle and Krupp did not have enough money or time for either of these, so they're going to quit. Before they did, they decided to do just one more blast. Now it's extremely lucky that they did, because they ran into a natural air vent that goes all the way up to the top, which is 250 feet. Now, while finding this, instead of waiting up to a month, they only had to wait a couple days, and they could have went another 600 feet before they had to worry about air again. Now, that is a 1 in a billion chance to find something like that. Natural air vents or caves are usually found in sedimentary rock like sandstone or limestone, or metamorphic rock like slate or gneiss. This right here is another flowstone wall. Now, what this flowstone wall is made out of is a mixture of sulfur, iron oxide, a very thin layer of water, creating that slimy appearance. It's not actually slimy, it's quite smooth. If you guys want to feel it, go ahead. Stalactites, now these grow only about a 1/4 inch every 25 years or so. Now at this point, Angle and Krupp were in their mid-50s. They were getting really tired of double jacking. Also, they're convinced that their luck has finally changed with finding that natural air vent. So they decided to go down to the Bismarck mine to get a $200 loan so they could get a pneumatic drill, a water pump, and an air compressor. We were able to drill quite a bit faster. Just watch you guys' heads and steps. It goes go low, a little slippery. You guys can head all the way back and I will follow you guys. Now, this is called a stope room. A stope room is where a mine finds the majority of whatever they're mining for. And in this stope room is a Columbia vein. Out of this room right here, they found a whopping 10 ounces of gold. In comparison, the Holy Terror, mine just right across the road, had a room about this size, and it pulled out 3,000 ounces of gold. Now first, they tried to go over this way. It see those metal rods sticking out? And it's just 5 feet over is the Columbia mine. Now the Columbia mine put those metal rods at the very end of their mine to warn Angle and Krupp not to go any farther. Otherwise they'd be claim jumping, could be shot. Now this is very unusual for a mine. Most mines really didn't care. If you claim jumped, just gave them a great excuse to come over here, kill you, and steal your mine. Now the Columbia mine pulled out 6,000 ounces of gold, and it was shut down in the 1920s. So with being unable to go that way, they went over this way. But at the fence, that's the end of their claim. If they went any farther, they'd be stealing from the Tycoon mine. As you guys can tell, they went farther anyway. Now the Tycoon mine pulled out 200 ounces of gold. Now they didn't know where the Tycoon mine began, so they didn't want to push their luck too much. So they went up. They went 30 feet, and while they're going up, they didn't have any ladders, so they would just climb up the stope, dragging up the pneumatic drill. They drill the blasting pattern. Once they're done, they'd have to drag it back down, move it so it get damaged during the blast. The guy would leave, the other guy would climb back up, place the explosive in the fuses, light the fuse, run back or climb back down, hide behind the corner, let the rocket blast right by them. They'd head on out. They'd wait for the dust to settle, start all over again. At the 30-foot mark, they ran into gold-bearing material, so they went over this way, see if they could run into another gold vein. They ended up running into that iron ore wall. Now the drill bits that they owned cannot go through it very well. In fact, they became dull in only 30 seconds. So they gave up. They found 10 ounces of gold for 30 years of work. That's just $200. That was just enough to pay off their loan, and that was it. Now Krupp signed off his half the claim to Angle. He left town. We're not quite sure what happened to him. Angle stayed in Keystone. Now he's feeling pretty bummed out since he spent all this time and money on a mine that barely produced anything. So to get his mind off his troubles, he went down to the local saloon, had a few drinks, played a couple card games. He ended up having a few too many drinks, and in those card games he lost everything he had except for the deed to his house and the deed to his mine. He didn't want to become homeless, so he decided to put the claim up on the table. There's 5 other miners at the table. They decided to also put their claims up. They thought this miner was producing fairly well because Angle and Krupp were always bragging about it. As you guys now know, they were lying. But at the end of that hand, he won. And when all 5 of those mines, all of them producing, including the Bismarck mine, well, he got that $200 loan, so he didn't have to pay that back anymore. Kept all the previous owners on as supervisors, moved to California, got a further rich man at the age of 95. Finally worked out for him, right? And if you guys look right over there, there's a bunch of little silver tags. That's where in 2006, the South Dakota School of Mines Technology took samples to see if there's any more gold in the mine. They did find a little bit, but to get an ounce of gold, they'd have to process around 70 tons of ore. That's just not economically feasible. In comparison, the Wharf mine, it's one of the few commercial gold mines in the Black Hills. It's up in the Lee Deadwood area. It's pulling out 1 ounce of gold for every 45 to 49 tons of ore. If you guys want to take photos in here, you guys can. If anybody wants to get their photo taken in the minecart, you guys can too. If you guys want me to take family photos of you guys, I'd be happy to. A small fee to have the ore works. Before the original one burned down in 1935, it was about 150 yards over that way. Now, at the beginning of the process, they dumped the ore into the ore bin, which stored the ore. Be at the very top of the mill. Right below it would be a bell crusher. There's a bell-shaped piece of iron there spinning around, breaking up the rock to about the size of tennis balls. After the bell crusher, went to the grizzly. The grizzly stored the rock because it's too big. It went down in the ore cart, back into the ore bin. It was small enough, went down into the jaw crusher. The jaw crusher works kind of like a mouth, breaking up the rock to about the size of sesame seeds. After the jaw crusher, went to the stamp mill. Each one of those stamps weighs about 1,000 pounds. Now while that was running, it was so loud, people in Rockville could hear it, which is 8 miles away. After the stamp mill, crushed the ore into a fine powder and went down to the copper table. Now if that was a real copper table, it'd be covered in mercury because mercury stuck to the gold and also to the copper. Now back then they didn't know how toxic mercury was, so they were extremely careless with it. They would use their hands, put it on, scrape it off, it would slowly absorb to their skin, especially if they had any cuts on their hands. And on hot summer days, since mercury is a liquid, some of it would evaporate. The guys working the copper table would end up breathing in that vapor. They could start to show signs of mercury poisoning as little as 4 months, and they're dying from mercury poisoning in about 4 years. Now when they found out how toxic mercury was, they switched to something they thought was a lot less lethal, cyanide.
Oh.
After the copper table, went down to the welcome table, which would shake back and forth, have water going over it, trying to catch that gold mercury mixture in those ridges. Now this wasn't very efficient. The recovery rate was only 80%. The other 20% or so would just wash out into the stream. Now a couple times a day, it would scrape off the copper table, the welcome table, put that mercury gold mixture into a cloth bag, squeeze out that excess mercury so they could reuse it. They take that gold mercury mixture downtown to the smelter the test the mixture, throw it into a crucible, stick the crucible into a furnace, heat it up to a little over 2,000 degrees so that mercury would boil off. The gold would melt down into a little button. Once they had that little gold button, they would save it up until they had enough, melt it down again, and cast it into a gold bar. And if this was a real gold bar, this would weigh about 180 pounds. Once they had the gold bar, they put it into a strong box, So you fill it up, only about 4 layers. Once they have 4 strong boxes, filled up 4 layers, they have them all taken down to the train station. They put one of the strong boxes on the train, put all the gold into one. They would take it down, or they would go down to Denver. The Denver Mint would buy their gold, put all the cash into a couple strong boxes, send it back up. Now, so much cash and gold going back and forth, train robberies did happen. Now, most of the time, the guys who are on the trains, they always try to steal the cash. That's because if they're trying to steal these gold bars, they can only get maybe 1 or 2 of them before their horse collapse, and the combined weight of the gold to give them the rider. And as you guys can see, this one has been broken into. This is found abandoned in a garage. Somebody decided to use it as target practice too. And right up there, that is an old winch pulley. That's what they use for the shaft mines to lower the men down, bring the ore up. That big roller right there, that's where they put the ore on the tools. Little bucket with holes in it, that's where the men stood. Up to 4 men would stand in that little bucket, one leg in, one leg out, holding onto the chain. Now every once in a while, if the weight wasn't even in that bucket, can end up swinging around. Once that happened, is a fairly certain thing that at least one of the miners, if not all of them, can end up hitting the walls, become pretty severely injured, or end up falling to their deaths. After quite a few accidents and deaths, they started using metal cage, so it was a lot safer for the miners. Now with that old pulley, there's no way to measure the depths, so how the miners fix that is tie ribbons to a cable. No, or ribbons to the cable. Now a ribbon could easily slip or fall off, so this was invented. As you guys can see, the depths indicator and chain on the cable lower causes the indicator to move to show where the buckets were. You'll notice though it's been switched a couple times. That's because the cable would stretch from the weight of the men in the ore. And instead of doing the safe thing, changing that cable out, they did the cost-effective thing, just switching the depths, which causes it to stretch even more, eventually snap, having miners fall down to their deaths. And this is called a honey wagon. Do you guys know what this is used for? It's a porta potty. Now this went through the mine only once per day, and with 12-hour work days, you do not want to miss it. That's why it's painted bright red. The last guy to use it had to clean it out. Now, you would think nobody would volunteer to clean this out. People would. They'd even get into fights over it. That's because if they found a piece of gold big enough to steal, the only way to get it out was to swallow it. There would be security guards at the very front of the mine checking anywhere where they could potentially hide the gold. So the guy who won the fight would close the lid, push it outside the mine to the end of the rails, hook up a hose on one end, that went into the stream, hook up a hose on the other, that would be connected to a water pump. Turn on the water pump, water would wash almost everything out. He'd go back in with a shovel and a pan, scrape up that bottom layer, put it into a pan it out, see if he found anything. Now, does anybody want to get their photo taken on this? Now, before that was invented, it took about 5 minutes per bit to be sharpened, but with that, it only took a minute. And here's the best bit. Now, if the guy who was working the pneumatic drill wasn't paying attention, this would end up happening. Once this happened, you'd have to go downtown and get it straightened out. And the guy who did this lost his wages for the day. Now, if it broke in half like this one did, the guy who broke it had to buy a whole new set. They came in sets of 10, and they cost $20. Now, remember, the guy who was working the pneumatic drill only got paid $1.50 a day. Now, this wasn't a death sentence for the guy. He could still go down to the company store, charge for the essentials. But once this happened, it was a guarantee he'd spend the rest of his life in debt. And if he had sons, there was a good chance that they'd end up working in the mines to help pay off his debt. And this right here is an old nitro box. This is what they use to store and transport nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin is highly unstable, which means if you hit it too hard or drop it, it could go off, killing a bunch of people. Now with those springs, if it fell off the wagon and just jiggle around a little bit, it's scaring a lot of people.